If you want to learn more about the topics of today's episode, visit the podcast website at naturesecretservice.com. Thanks for listening. Okay, people, listen up. Here we go. This is Nature's Secret Service, the podcast that puts you in the room with the men and women of wildlife law enforcement. I'm your host, Ed Newcomer. And of course, you know I was a special agent with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for more than 20 years. And today we actually have two guests with us coming in remotely from their homes around the country. And I'm super happy to have these two gentlemen here because I knew them while I was a special agent and I always loved being around them. Paul Weyland and Steve Magone are our guests today. Both are retired special agents from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'll introduce Paul, give you a little background on him first. Although he was a criminal justice major in college, I don't think he really thought he was going to end up a federal agent because for 3 years after he graduated from college, Paul actually played professional golf. He was a professional golfer, which is totally cool. But he eventually took a job as a background investigator for the Civil Service Commission, and then 3 years after that, he was hired to be a special agent for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Paul Weyland retired from the service in 2007, and he's now back to professionally golfing, and he runs his own prestigious golf coaching service called Paul Weyland Golf, LLC. Steve Magone is our other guest. Steve started his career as a Montana State game warden and worked as a warden for 10 years before he was hired by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to be a special agent. He retired in 2006, and he's an avid hunter and houndsman, which is a very unique thing to do. I was fascinated by hounds. Both Paul and Steve served their entire special agent careers in the Western United States. And like me, they both kind of got their start in Los Angeles, where also like me, they had the opportunity to work with and be trained by Special Agent Marie Palladini, who you probably remember from season 1 of this podcast. I wanted these two guys on because, number one, they're super fun and they're super fun together. But in 1995, the very year that wolves were returned to the wild in Yellowstone National Park in Idaho, both Steve and Paul were stationed in Idaho, basically ground zero for wolf reintroduction, but also ground zero for a lot of anti-government sentiment and activity in the United States. Paul Weyland, thank you for being on the episode. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see you again. I'm so happy you're here.
Thanks for having me, Ed. Really appreciate it. It's going to be a fun story to tell.
It is. And Steve Magone, thanks so much for being here. I miss you guys. It's so great to see you again.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Just, I wish we could have, we had been recording when you and I, the three of us, were kind of chatting as we were getting all the technical stuff figured out for today, because Steve and Paul together, you guys worked together a lot in the field. Obviously, you knew each other a long time, your whole careers. And you are so fun to watch banter. Steve, just before we started recording, you were about to tell me a story about working with Paul near the Salton Sea in Southern California. I want you to go ahead and tell that story before we jump into our wolf case.
Well, it was a long time ago, but as best as I can remember, we were down there to work the Salton Sea and check duck hunters, goose hunters. And we had a room in this motel, and we shared the room, to save money, basically. And I knew that he was some kind of a sleepwalker. I didn't know he was a scary sleepwalker. Like one time he walked outside and he was sound asleep. And one other time, I'm asleep in bed, but I feel like something's watching me. And I wake up, and Paul is standing there with a knife.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
It was a little knife.
It was just a little one.
It was a little pocket knife.
I could tell he was asleep though, so I hollered at him, and he woke up pretty quick. But I asked him what the heck he was doing, but he didn't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Paul, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that accusation.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to respond to, really. That was the last time we ever shared a room together. I can tell you that. I mean, and I've been prone to sleepwalking my whole life. When I was a kid, I walked off a deck that was about close to 20 feet high.
Wow, Paul, I never knew this about you.
Yeah, that's what happened to my brain. So that's why I got hired by Fish and Wildlife. But luckily, I fell into a really soft flower garden that was soft dirt, like topsoil just put in. I walked into swimming pools, and so.
Wow.
But that was the first with a knife, and last time we ever shared a room together.
Well, I feel a little guilty because I feel like we're revealing some type of, confidential information about you, Paul.
I've had it checked out by shrinks and neurologists. I'm fine.
All right. Well, we'll talk later. If you want us to edit this part out, we can do that.
It was good for me, Ed, because it made me a much lighter sleeper.
Exactly. It keeps you on your toes, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I love hearing stories about agents who worked in the Los Angeles field office because we all, that's a very diverse duty station to work. But all of us, anybody who's worked there, has the shared experience of working alongside state game wardens in the Salton Sea area on duck hunters and goose hunters. But we also have the shared experience of working dove hunters in the El Centro Valley there. And it's a unique experience to, work those hunting seasons alongside state game wardens when often, it's 100 degrees out and you're trying to enforce hunting laws. Yeah. But everybody's got stories from working those times. Anyway,
Steve and I, we both worked there and in LA. Steve left before I did, but we became really close and we've remained really close friends ever since. And we worked real close together and had a lot of good times. And we, like I said, we're still really good friends.
I think that is amazing. I have really super close friends from my time as an agent too that I've had my whole career and continue to maintain. And they're some of my best friends of my entire life. So that's very cool. And it shows when you guys are together and you're talking, it definitely shows. And I think from the context of the case we're going to talk about today, I think it was really valuable to be partnered up on this investigation with somebody who you knew very well, you trusted very much, and who was your friend, regardless of whether or not they show up in the middle of the night holding a knife asleep.
For sure.
And before we jump right into the case, I just want to give some context to where you were working at the time. This would have been around this incident occurred that we're going to talk about today in 1995, which was the year wolves were released or reintroduced. And looking at what was going on in the Pacific Northwest, Idaho, Washington, Montana, in 1995. I just want to give listeners and watchers a little bit of an understanding of timeline. In the 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, there were groups known as the Aryan Nations and the Order were operating in that area, very active, very anti-government. The Ruby Ridge standoff occurred in August of 1992, where FBI agents, an FBI agent shot and killed Randy Weaver's wife and infant son accidentally, but in that standoff. And then, of course, the Waco standoff, which was not in Idaho, in Texas, but in February 1993. But a lot of the anti-government sentiment in Idaho and eastern Washington at that time was heavily impacted by what happened at Waco in 93. So can you guys just each respectively just tell us a little bit, in 1995, what was it like to be a federal agent trying to work in Idaho? Did you sense a lot of that anti-government feeling, or what was your experience? Let's start with Paul.
Yeah, and I can start on that 100%. I mean, we were not respected. We were not wanted. We were not liked by a lot of people. In 1992, I had already been charged and arrested in a county called Gem County, just north of Boise, where I was stationed, for legally going out on private land to check goose hunters.
Whoa, Paul, I never knew this. As an agent, as a badge carrying, gun wearing agent doing your job, you were arrested by locals.
Yeah, well, wasn't physically arrested, but I was charged by criminal complaint and served.
Right.
And it ended up being transferred to federal court because I was acting under the authority of my duties. And it was ultimately dismissed by a magistrate judge under the open fields doctrine.
Yes,
which
of course.
We all know basically states we can go in open fields to conduct our business.
Right.
But that's how it was. I mean, we were not liked. We weren't not really wanted. And there was a lot of anti-government sentiment in the area. Jackbooted thugs.
Yeah, that's how we were referred to by anybody who didn't like us. That's for sure. Steve, what was your experience? Similar?
It wasn't as bad. I lived in Idaho Falls in southeastern Idaho instead of Boise. And actually, the favorite part of my whole district was probably Lemhi County, the salmon area. But I didn't run into too much of that around Idaho Falls at all. But a lot of my casework was not in Idaho Falls. Some of it was coming out of Yellowstone Park with illegal elk. That was in '88, the year of the big Yellowstone fire.
Right.
So I didn't have nearly as much of that in southeast Idaho like Paul did.
Okay. Well, that's good because that makes it tough to do your job when you're watching for bad guys, but you don't know who in the public you can trust, That's tough.
What happened, Ed, was when you're an agent in Idaho and you're sending out, a lot of the wildlife is killed in Idaho and then taken to other states.
Mm-hmm.
And then you send leads out and those agents will interview them and send the investigation back to you. And everyone is really happy when you're catching non-residents killing bighorn sheep or elk illegally, and taking them, and then you end up catching them. Mm-hmm. But it's a little different when you catch some of the good old boys doing the same stuff. And then, there was animosity there, that's for sure.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah, catch everybody, catch all the outsiders, but don't bother the locals, right?
Yeah.
And I will say this, Ed, we always had great support from Idaho Fish and Game officers. And it just seemed like when in my area, the further remote you got, the more kind of troubles you had with people and sometimes even law enforcement. Interesting.
I think that last statement, even with law enforcement, is going to be very apropos as we go through this story today. One aside too that I think is really interesting. You guys both having worked in LA, I think you'll appreciate this. When I was in LA, I was always, you don't think of the Los Angeles field office as doing a lot of big game work, and we don't do a lot of, obviously field investigations related to big game work, but we did respond to a lot of leads from agents from the Western U.S. because, people from Los Angeles travel to the Western Rocky Mountain states to go big game hunting, and they sometimes commit violations and take those trophies back to LA, which would be a Lacey Act violation. So I ended up, in my career, I did a lot of big game investigations associated with leads from agents like you guys who had suspects back in LA, which was always kind of fun and interesting. But, you don't think about that. The LA agents do some big game work, but it's usually following up on leads for agents outside of California or Los Angeles anyway.
Well, Ed, when I first got to Los Angeles, Marie Palladini was a senior resident agent.
Yep.
And she could tell. I mean, I came from Phillipsburg, a town that had one street light, which they did away with, to Los Angeles. And it took a while to adjust to
I'll bet.
that. I mean, it took me a while to figure out how to even get to the office and back to my house for a while.
Right.
But one of the first cases she assigned me was an elk that had been killed illegally in Idaho and then taken to Los Angeles area. So that made me feel at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, probably made you feel like, hey, I can definitely work here for sure, right?
Yeah. I knew how to do that.
Yeah. It's funny. I think one of the first things she assigned to me when I was her trainee was an investigation involving a moose trophy that had been brought back to LA from somewhere in the Rockies. I can't remember where. I was much less equipped to deal with that than you were, Steve, I'll tell you what. Okay, so the story that we're going to tell you today really begins January 1995, when wolves are reintroduced to the greater Yellowstone area, including central Idaho. The Idaho wolves were the first released. They were not in what they call kind of habituation pens. They were just released. And Steve, tell us a little bit give us an introduction to this case. Tell us about this wolf that we're going to talk about today, when it was released and how it came to your attention as a law enforcement officer.
Well, they were released mostly along the middle fork of the Salmon in the Frank Church. Some of them were released at Corn Creek, which is at the end of the road going down the main Salmon, below where it hits the middle fork. And that was on January 20th. And about 8 days later, the wolf B13 was its ear tag, was shot on the Hussey Ranch near Elk Bend, Idaho, which is south of Salmon.
Okay, so shortly after it was released, it ends up shot. How did it come to your attention that the wolf had been shot?
Well, on the 30th of January, the Limhi County Sheriff's Office called me and told me about it. And at the time, I didn't understand why there was a delay, because the sheriff had been notified the day before, but he chose not to notify me till the 30th. And then it turns out other people had been notified on the 28th and had been there. So I don't know exactly why he waited so long, but they did.
Okay. And so what did you do next once you get that report from the sheriff's office, delayed report? What's your next step?
Well, he called me at home and I went up there. And again, it seemed kind of odd. He had me meet him at the sheriff's office, and he had already been down there. And then he and I traveled down to the Hussey Ranch, where he introduced us. And then I began my investigation on the wolf and calf carcass.
Okay. So and introduced you to who? Who did he introduce you to?
Gene Hussey.
Gene Hussey, the owner of the ranch.
Yes.
Okay, so just to summarize, this dead wolf is, according to the sheriff's office, been shot, and it's on Hussey's ranch, private property.
Right.
And you mentioned a calf. There was something about this wolf. There was some controversy about a calf, cattle.
Yeah, it was a major controversy. And see, before I ever got there, Hussey had discovered this dead wolf, as the story goes, the dead wolf and the dead calf. And he called, among other things, the local veterinarian to come out and do a necropsy on the calf and the wolf.
Okay.
And also the Idaho Farm Bureau had been out there filming. Some of the Idaho Cattlemen's Association had showed up. It had snowed, but there was footprints all over the place. I mean, you couldn't tell anything from the tracks what had went on. Some people surmise that maybe snowmobilers had shot it. We don't know.
When you say tracks, you mean human tracks or animal tracks?
Human tracks and vehicle tracks.
Okay. So just another good thing to know for listeners and watchers is that, so when wolves were reintroduced, the wolves inside Yellowstone National Park, obviously they're protected as long as they're inside the park because there's no hunting in the park. Wolves outside the park, any wolf outside the park would have been protected by the Endangered Species Act. But because they were reintroduced species, they were protected, but they could be taken or shot if they engaged in certain behaviors. And one of those might have been preying on domestic cattle or livestock, right? But there would have been a process for that to get permission to do that, correct?
Well, no, I mean, if say Mr. Hussey had went out and if he had seen this wolf killing one of his calves or one of the mother cows or whatever, he could have shot it.
Okay, he could take action just in the moment immediately.
Absolutely, and nobody would have a problem with that. They need to protect their property, and ultimately, wolves need to be managed somehow anyway. You just can't have that.
So, was Hussey claiming though that he shot this wolf because it was preying on the calf, or did he claim he shot the wolf, or did he just? Okay.
No, he said he did not shoot it.
Okay.
And he did not know who shot it.
So why was there a veterinarian out there and the Department of Agriculture from the state looking at this whole issue of the calf and the wolf?
Well, it was the Idaho Farm Bureau. I can tell you what it was ultimately. Ultimately, the Endangered Species Act was up for reauthorization. And there had been a whole bunch of things that had happened in Idaho. And the Idaho Farm Bureau was not happy with the Endangered Species Act at all, particularly a guy named Mike Tracy, who put absurd things in the paper about it. But mostly, they were trying to derail the reauthorization of the Endangered Species Act. And this became, I would call it their poster child.
Okay.
Because they wanted a trusted veterinarian to come out and do the necropsy of the calf because they said they did not trust the federal government to do it. So that's why. And
what did they do? Do you recall what that necropsy showed?
Yeah, well, his vet Cope's necropsy, he believed that the wolf probably did kill the calf.
Okay.
And then we had a young ADC guy come out, animal damage control,
right?
Now called Wildlife Services.
For USDA, yeah.
I don't know how much experience he had exactly, but he thought that the wolf probably killed the calf when he skinned it out. But ultimately what happened is I took the calf and the wolf, took the calf with Hussey's permission, really, and I sent them both to the National Forensics Lab in Ashland, Oregon, and they examined it, and their conclusion was that the wolf did not kill the calf because there was hardly any blood. Like when I went out there, I looked at the wolf. The wolf's not completely frozen really or anything, and you could see where it had been shot through the left and come out the right shoulder, and the blood had come out from the wolf and melted down through the snow. Just like if you deer or elk hunt, you see that kind of stuff all the time.
Right.
Well, the calf, when I looked at it, the calf had not bled hardly at all, which means its heart wasn't beating when it was getting chewed on. And the other important thing was the top part of the calf, the side that was to the up, it had all been cleaned off by the cow, which they do. They clean the fetal membrane off of it, and they lick it, and it creates a bond between the cow and the calf, just like with other animals.
Right.
And in fact, elk will even eat the membrane to cut down on the smell for predators.
Right.
But anyhow, the bottom side it was still on there.
Ah,
So that's telling me that if it was born alive, it might have taken a couple breaths and then died, and then this wolf came along and chewed on it. And that's
okay.
what the lab believed also.
Okay, so the Fish and Wildlife Service Forensics Lab concluded that the calf was dead when the wolf was eating it?
Exactly.
Okay, or had died before the wolf started
It had
eating it.
died before the wolf started depredating on it.
Okay, which would make a big difference, right? Because if the wolf is actively preying on a domestic cattle species, then there would be justification to shoot it. If it's eating a dead calf, it's not taking a live domestic cattle, right?
Right. And the other thing that seemed odd, in Phillipsburg and Broadus and Harlowton, where I worked all those places, people don't generally drag a dead cow down to where they're going to calve,
Right.
because it attracts predators. And just maybe 100 or 150 yards, I forget how far, not very far, there was the remains of a dead cow right there. So
So that struck you as suspicious that the calf was in that area?
Sure.
Okay. So
Yeah.
this is kind of interesting. Where you are now is you've got this report of a shot wolf, confirmed that it's shot. Obviously, the lab stuff took place later, so you didn't quite know the status of the calf. But you have a landowner who's basically reporting this, but claiming they didn't shoot the wolf. So
Right.
what do you do next, and how does Paul Weyland come into play here? How does he get associated with what you're doing? Or Paul, how do you get into this case?
Well, Steve sent all that to the lab, and the lab did the research. And Steve, if I recall, Steve sent him a diagram of what the terrain looked like. And they said from the angle from where the road was and where the wolf was, they said that angle, that bullet's going to be in that hillside right behind where that dead wolf was.
Aha. Okay.
So that was enough to get a search warrant. And I don't remember who did the affidavit. Steve, did you do the affidavit for the search warrant, or did Tom and I?
No, I think I did. And then I sent it over to you.
Yeah.
And you may have amended it or added something, but
Yeah.
you took it to the
Tom
judge.
Riley was our boss then, and I think Steve did the affidavit, and Tom and I added to it, and then I took it down and got a search warrant signed by had it approved by the U.S. attorney, and then got a search warrant signed by the judge, and I swore to the affidavit.
I see.
So we were directed then by the court to go do search that property for evidence of a bullet. So we could then hopefully sometime recover a rifle, do ballistics, and match it. Even though I'll say this, we did not need a warrant.
Right.
This
I was just going to say open fields. Yeah.
Yeah,
open
we
fields.
didn't need a warrant. But the U.S. attorney, because of all the anti-government sentiment at the time, they said, we're going to get a warrant just to calm people's fears and to make it all look more in order.
Got it. Okay, so I take it your warrant was pretty narrow. It was probably just for the area of the property where you expected to find a bullet, right?
Right.
Yeah, the area was just for the property, not for the house.
Okay.
We had no evidence that anything was in the house, just because we had no idea what type of rifle it was. It was just to find the bullet.
Okay. So
And this is 3 miles up the creek from his house.
Yeah.
yeah, far away from the house, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So, this is interesting, Paul, because you mentioned that a lot of times, federal agents are referred to as jackbooted thugs by these people who are anti-government. And yet here the jackbooted thugs have authority under very well settled U.S. law about open fields to just go do it. You could have just walked onto this guy's field and started looking for a bullet with your metal detector and shovels. But you went to the trouble to make sure that the case, your reason for going on his property was reviewed by an assistant U.S. attorney and then by a judge and signed off. That's not the behavior of a jackbooted thug.
No, yeah.
No.
We went above and beyond for that. Just because we knew what would happen if we went there without a warrant.
Yeah.
What we didn't know what would happen is what would happen if we went there even with a warrant.
Right.
What happened next? So, okay, so we're really moving pretty quickly here, but we don't really have a suspect. We're just going to go out and we're going to look for more evidence. you've gone to the trouble of getting this warrant. Explain to people, now you've got a warrant in hand to search this limited space, open space on a property. What do you guys do next? How many agents do you take with you? What does that process look like?
Well, it was myself and Tom Riley. We met Steve, and I don't remember where we met Steve. We met somewhere, maybe if we met in Salmon. Anyway, we all met. There was 3 of us.
Okay.
And to go execute the warrant.
Yeah, it's a simple warrant, right? It's not like you're going into a house.
We're not going in a house looking for documents. It was going to take maybe a half an hour.
Right. Okay, so Steve, tell us you go out there, you got some metal detectors with you, I assume, and what happens? Is there a fence you got to cross? How does this work?
Yeah, there was a fence and a gate, and Paul and Tom are down by the creek, and I think I went up onto the road to talk to another guy who turns out to be Gene Hussey's brother-in-law.
Okay.
Who was a real reasonable guy. I was talking to him, and we hear all of this cussing and hollering, and Mr. Hussey comes up and he starts winging some rocks at us, at me in particular, it seemed like, but it didn't seem that bad, really. I mean, one time when I was in Anaconda, I was serving a search warrant with another warden, and this lady started throwing frozen elk packages at us. That's what it reminded me of.
So wait a second. You guys go on to this property, and there's a random person just on the road leading up to the house, or what?
He had been coming. I think he was coming down the road. He lived on up the creek a ways, and he was coming down to the road, I think, to go to the dump or something.
Okay, so he saw you guys, and you just went up to kind of explain who you were.
Well, Hussey had blocked the road with his rig, and he was coming up. And I guess I was in the field at that time because he was throwing the rocks at us and hollering, and I tried to give him a copy of the search warrants, but I really hadn't been cussed at that much since I was in Marine Corps boot camp.
So where did Hussey come from? Was he up at the house and he saw you guys, or how did he appear?
Well, when we went to serve the search warrant, Tom, Steve, and I went and knocked on his house.
Oh, you went up there to tell him you were there.
Give him a copy of the search warrant. Well, he wasn't home, so we went to the neighbor's house and we said, "Hey, we have a copy. We have a search warrant for that property up there to look for a bullet, and we want to give it to Hussey." And she said, "Well, he's in town." And my boss, Tom Riley, said, "Well, we're just going to tack it on the door." So we just left a copy of the warrant on his door to give him notice that we had a warrant. And we said, "We're going to go up there." She said, "Well, he's not going to be happy." And I said, "Well, we're ordered by the court to serve this warrant." So we drive up there. Steve and I got out of the truck and we walked down to the creek. And then it was shortly after that, not very long, we didn't even turn on our metal detectors. And there was a row of trees up above the creek. And we see Hussey cussing, and he's walking through the trees. Of course, my first concern is he armed?
Is he armed? Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and he was telling us, I mean, I'm not going to say the language he was using, but, get off this land and it's private. And we noticed he didn't have a gun. And I was telling him, "Hey, we have a federal search warrant. We're directed to be here by a court." And he said, your federal search warrant is no good in this county. Yeah. It's not valid anywhere in this county. And you got to get off the land. And by then he came down the creek, and he was on the opposite side of the creek as Steve and I. And that's when he started picking up rocks and hurling them at us. And if I recall correctly, I told Steve, and Steve Magone was recording this whole conversation when he got down close. And I told Steve, I said, "Let's just hop across there and arrest him." Mm-hmm. And Steve was a little worried because we might have hurt him. And, he was not young. So Steve didn't want to do that. And
he was 75, I think.
He was 75. But he was throwing rocks at us. I'm like, "Yeah, let's hop across there and just throw him to the ground and arrest him," because I was done with it. And Steve said, yeah, let me see if I can talk him. And of course, he was still hollering at us. Our search warrant was not valid in that county. And I said, yeah, it is. And if you don't like it, move your butt to Russia. So that's what I told him during that conversation. Anyway, Steve calmed him down and actually got him. Steve said, well, why don't we go talk? He said, I called the sheriff and he's on his way. And Steve calmed him down and finally said, hey, let's go have a cup of coffee and wait up at the truck. So that's where we went. From there, the three of us went back up the truck, hopped across the fence, and waited for the sheriff.
Steve, what was your reaction when this guy comes down here cursing at you, telling you don't have any authority to be there when you've obviously presented him with a federal search warrant, and he's throwing rocks at you? Why was your reaction to that so different than Paul's?
Well, I had met him before.
Okay. You knew Hussey.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd met him because I was up there, and when I collected the calf and collected the wolf, and we talked to him, and the sheriff was there, and I was a little surprised. I'll tell you what it reminded me of, is it reminds me of someone that has PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
That's what it reminded me of. And I knew
Interesting.
he'd been in World War II. And I don't know how long that disorder lasts, but if it's not treated, it can last forever, I think. That's what it reminded me of. I mean, I think if he weren't a federal agent, he could be real nice.
You know, your interaction with each other and kind of how you worked through this situation, you guys were really good partners together, because I used to work with Aaron Dean a lot, who was an agent in the Los Angeles field office. And Paul, I think I was more like you. I didn't really take a lot of shit from people. I'd put up with a little bit, but you start throwing rocks at me, or you start putting your hands on me, you're going to jail. I'm going to arrest you, And I always liked working with Aaron, because between the two of us, one of us would kind of balance the other person out and de-escalate, help de-escalate if it was necessary, or just kind of reaffirm with each other, what are we going to do here? What's the best course of action? And you guys seemed like you worked really well together in that way, right? I mean, you could have just you could have just jumped over the creek at that moment, put handcuffs on him, and if he resisted, you could have used force to arrest him, because he was assaulting a federal officer at that point.
100%.
Right. But Ed, you have to remember, well, now I'm almost as old as he was, but at the time I knew he was 75 or 76.
Yeah.
And if you do that to an old person, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Well, yeah, and given where you were working too, right?
Yeah,
the sentiments.
And actually, I had called the Fish and Game on the radio, because there was, I think I had an old a bag phone or something in, but there was no cell service there anyway. Mm-hmm. And they called the sheriff's office because we wanted him to come out.
Ah, okay. So both you and Hussey wanted the sheriff to come out.
We all did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But as it turns out, he didn't recognize our warrant either. And regardless of what he says, and what he said at two different congressional inquiries or meetings, his actions speak.
Yeah. Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. I want to go back to you, Steve, turned on an audio recorder at some point. When did you do that, and why did you decide to turn on an audio recorder?
I think I turned it on when I heard him and he started cussing, and I just knew things could not be good.
That was smart. That turned out to be very smart.
Well, I wanted to document it.
Yeah.
Because I knew, I had the feeling there was more than just the dead calf and a dead wolf at this point. Mm-hmm. And I knew it was going to go somewhere.
Okay. So at this point, you haven't even started looking for a bullet. You have this confrontation with Hussey. You turn on your recorder. You're getting the whole exchange. Everything from Hussey yelling at you, cursing at you. You can even hear rocks hitting the ground and in the creek in the recording. Yeah. And then your conversation is on there, what you say to him, what he says to you. And so he tells you called the sheriff. You want the sheriff to come out anyway. You've radioed the state game wardens that That's what you want. And then you go back up to the road with Hussey, right? Or up to the car or something like that.
Yeah. And then and actually, I was up by the road when the sheriff showed up.
Yeah. So what happened when the sheriff shows up?
Well, he asked to see a copy of the warrant, which I showed him. And then he asked for the probable cause statement, which, we call the affidavit, same thing.
Right.
And we told him that was on file at the clerk's office. And he just looked, and I started to go back onto the property, and he stood in my way.
The sheriff did?
Yeah. Yeah, he tried to block me from going onto the property, and he said, if Gene wants you to leave, then I think you ought to leave.
Wow. Okay.
So then he took Gene kind of by the arm, and they left.
Huh. Paul, what was you and Tom Riley, Agent Tom Riley, are also there. What was your reaction to all this? The sheriff's, response.
Well, Tom Riley is a big man.
He's a very.
He played defensive football. He was a defensive lineman for the Colts before he was an agent.
Right.
And the sheriff was a little guy. And when he told us that if Eugene Hussey doesn't want us on his land, we're not coming. We're not getting on it. And Steve Magone hops across the fence back on lawn.
I love that.
He puts his hand on, he tries to block Steve. And I remember Tom Riley gently, he was a gentleman. Even though he was big, he was gentle. I remember Tom Riley putting his hand that's twice the size as my hand on that man's neck and said, don't even think about it or you're going to jail.
He did this, to the sheriff.
To the sheriff.
Wow.
And I was kind of like, I could see the sheriff's gun. I could see his hand close to the gun. And I'm kind of behind the fence post thinking, is this going to be a shootout?
Right. With a sheriff. That's crazy.
With a sheriff. And so I'm kind of behind the fence post there on the property side. And and when Tom put his hand on there, the sheriff backed down and he said, we'll go to plan B.
Yeah.
The sheriff said, we'll go to plan B. Very cryptic.
Yeah. So he said, come on, Hussey, get in. So Hussey hopped in the sheriff's truck and they took off.
Holy shit.
One of Hussey's, who was that other guy that was there?
It was his brother-in-law.
His brother-in-law was coming down because he was going to empty his garbage. And he had stopped there. And when he saw how tense things were getting, he hid behind his truck. And when the sheriff and Hussey left, he came out. And I remember saying, what does plan B mean?
Yeah.
And he said, they're going to be back here within a half an hour with a truckload or two of armed men.
Holy shit.
You guys off this property.
Oh my God. That's scary.
And he turned around and went back up to his house. And Tom and I and Steve talked for a minute. And so we got our metal detectors and we all went down to the creek. And we got down to the creek, and Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is how I remember this, and I remember this pretty vividly. Tom, we were just going to turn on our metal detectors, and Tom said, hey, Steve, where does this road go, and where does it go to? And Steve said, well, it dead ends up there, a mile or so up the road. It's a dead-end road.
Yeah, it was more than that, but it was a ways, plus it was winter.
It was the waste. Plus, it was winter. Anyway, so Tom Riley goes, well, let me get this right. We're in a box canyon with nowhere out, and we could be facing 2 truckloads of armed men. And I said, well, that's what they said plan B was going to be.
Right.
And I mean, I believed it because I dealt with this in Gem County, and the anti-Fed sentiment among even some law enforcement, not state patrol, but some rural counties had a lot of anti-government sentiment. And he said, boys, he said, it's not worth risking our lives or having to shoot someone to get this bullet. So we packed up and left. And
Holy cow.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so we packed up our stuff, went up, left, and we were Steve, I guess we were in two different vehicles because Tom and I came from Boise.
Yeah.
And when Tom and I left, I remember looking in the mirror and I saw a pickup truck with men in it. It was kind of far, but they were in the back of a truck, and they turned up that road. So I mean, so that's what we did.
Holy cow, that'll wake you up at night. I'll tell you
Yeah.
what.
Ed, I made one major mistake on that, in that I believed what would happen is when the sheriff got there, he would say, well, Mr. Hussey, this is a valid federal search warrant. They have a right to be here. I'll stay here with you. They can go down and search for a half hour, an hour, or whatever. And chances are we wouldn't find the bullet anyway. It could have went in the creek. Who knows?
Right.
Could have disintegrated too after it came out and hit a rock. I mean, I don't know.
Sure.
So anyway, I figured he would say that. And I had turned my tape recorder off by this point. And that was a big mistake. I should have left it on and recorded him. And actually, we should have had another person videotaping the whole deal, which I learned on future search warrants we did. So.
Yeah, it's kind of shocks the conscience when you encounter another law enforcement officer who is clearly, disregarding the law. Basically assisting someone in obstructing law enforcement, basically what that sheriff did was obstructed a federal investigation.
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, you expect that from the public, right? But you don't expect it from someone who's supposed to be on our side, who's sworn to uphold the law and the Constitution.
Exactly. And it's a crime to obstruct an investigation.
It is. And that brings us to the next part of this.
Yes. So what happens next? You guys, it sounds like, pretty narrowly got out of there just in time before a bunch of armed thugs showed up who were going to make trouble. What do you guys do next after that? You've got this warrant you weren't able to execute. You got a sheriff who obstructed justice. What do you do next?
Well, I can kind of take some of that. And from here, Tom and I go back to Boise. We go right to the office. It's fairly late by then. And we called Dave McMullen, who was he was the agent in charge of the whole region, and we briefed him. And then we called he suggested we call Interior Secretary Molly Beatty, and we briefed her on what would happen, because we knew this was going to go sideways on us from a political standpoint.
Right.
And we called the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I wrote up an affidavit as to why we didn't execute the warrant, because when you have a warrant, as you know, maybe some of the listeners don't understand this, but it's not our option to execute that warrant, serve the warrant.
Right.
We're ordered by a court to do it. So we have to do it. So we wrote up an affidavit, I did, as to why we did not execute the warrant. And the next day, I returned the warrant to the magistrate judge who issued the warrant.
Yeah, and that's an important note, Paul. That's a great note that you just made. It's a directive for agents to go serve the warrant and to do the things that are in the warrant. And so when you're done serving a warrant, the agent has to go back to the judge who issued the warrant and turn in what's called a return, which basically explains what evidence you seized and then what day the warrant was served. Yeah, so they expect to know what you did with their order.
Exactly.
Exactly. Okay, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
No worries. So I returned the warrant to the magistrate judge who had issued it, and I returned it unexecuted with the affidavit. And he read the affidavit, and he said, "So you were obstructed by the sheriff, and that's why you did not execute this warrant." I said, "Yes, sir." I said, he told us that we weren't welcome on that land if the landowner didn't want us, and he told us we had to leave. And when I told him in the affidavit about the Plan B, he said, "Okay, I understand." I said, "Well, are you going to reissue the warrant?" And he said, "Well, a lot of that depends. Is the U.S. Attorney's Office going to charge the sheriff with obstruction?" And so I said, I don't know at this point. They have all the information, they have all the evidence. And it was a clear case of obstructing a federal agent in the course of our duties.
Mm-hmm. And what did the U.S. attorney do or say about that?
Well, we had a criminal chief and U.S. attorney, and the U.S. attorney decided not to charge the sheriff.
Okay.
And a lot of the reason was, this was a highly charged time, like we discussed earlier, about federal agents not being liked or wanted, anti-federal sentiment. And of course, the U.S. attorney was wanting to be a senator at that time. And so, and there was a lot of political stuff involved in not charging the sheriff. And he should have been charged.
Yeah, sounds like
we
it.
should have been back there with another warrant. Mm-hmm. And the magistrate judge was also up for a district court judge, which he never got, but he was up for that. So a lot of people were afraid to do stuff because they were trying to save their political careers. And we all know the U.S. attorney at every district, that's a political appointee job.
Absolutely. Yep.
So nothing ever got done.
Wow.
No one was ever charged. We never went back there with a search warrant. And the sheriff never got charged.
So this very kind of important, and what's funny is this is a wolf case, and the whole wolf issue is kind of getting lost in the mix here. This very important early wolf poaching case basically gets lost in the shitstorm that is anti-government sentiment in the West there at that time.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And what people tend to forget, it's the Endangered Species Act, but killing a wolf is a misdemeanor. It's a federal misdemeanor.
Exactly.
It's not right, but it's not the crime of the century.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's something that we investigate.
100%. Yeah. And it was important for wolf recovery at the time that people be held accountable for wolf poaching because the numbers weren't very high at that time, right?
Right.
So this case gets even crazier. Your investigation's kind of stalled because you can't get the warrant reissued. The sheriff's not going to get charged. You would think, okay, Hussey and the sheriff got away with it, whatever they did. But that wasn't the end of it for these guys, was it? What did they do next?
No, I'll let Steve kind of deal with that, talk about that part a little bit, about how what happened with the senators and Molly Beatty. Steve, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the headlines the next day in the paper were armed agents serve warrant. And
the lies begin.
Yeah, and of course I wore my sidearm when I went up to investigate it and to pick up the wolf and to the sheriff's office. And I wore it all the time.
Of course, every day.
That's what we do.
Yep. Federal agent.
And, but now it's armed agents serve warrant. And from there, it just only got worse, I guess, because for whatever reason, the sheriff kept putting things in the paper about rude agents aren't going to be tolerated in my county. And they were really close to using too much force. And it just went on and on and on. And then Helen Chenoweth, who was a representative, she called a hearing in Boise, which salmon wasn't even in her district, I don't think. And it was a one-sided thing that all he did was beat up federal agents and why agents are armed and federal land managers and all that stuff. Well, and then the one that was made the most sense at or the greatest effort at making the most sense out of this was Mike Crapo had a hearing in Washington, and both Hussey and Barcelo testified there as well. But Crapo's hearing was pretty good. It wasn't nearly like Chenoweth's, but the big point they're trying to make is that there wasn't any cooperation when in fact we had tried to cooperate. He wouldn't even return my calls most of the time.
Yeah, you mentioned Barcelo. That was the sheriff, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And there's a couple of points here, Steve, that I know from talking to you before. Didn't Hussey lie that you guys had ransacked his house?
No, that wasn't him.
Oh, that wasn't him. Somebody said that though, didn't
I
they?
don't know. That was the Idaho Farm Bureau said that we searched his house without a warrant. And which completely not.
Yeah. Somebody got that information wrong.
Yeah,
though.
that was in the paper that we had gone in and ransacked his house and tore it apart. Yeah. And all we did was put a copy of the warrant.
Right.
And then of course, Hussey and the sheriff got on the phone with the senators, Chenoweth and another senator.
Craig.
Larry Craig was the other senator, and they got on the phone with them and said the same thing. And then, of course, who do they go to? Molly Beatty, who's our director. And then she comes, and Tom and I have briefed her on exactly what we did.
Yeah, so Molly Beatty was the director of the Fish and Wildlife Service at the time.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Right. Yeah.
And we had briefed her that night. We did the search warrant. When we got back to Boise, we briefed her by Tom talked to her, and I was in his office. And we told her exactly what happened. She comes out the next day or the day after she gets complaints from the senators and believes them and says, Fish and Wildlife agents, we made some mistakes in serving that warrant.
Yeah. That was
unbelievable. And it went further than that too, didn't it? Didn't she issue basically a directive that all agents in the service would, from that point forward, not conduct Endangered Species Act take investigations without approval from the director's office? Didn't she do that?
Yeah, I believe I recall that. Yes, she did.
Yeah,
she had to be notified.
So
she did clarify that she's in her statement, which was pretty long. And she testified at the congressional hearing in Washington that if any mistakes were made, it wasn't by the agents, it was by the heads of the divisions. I'm not keeping her informed.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Even though you called that night to tell her exactly what happened. Unbelievable. She
wasn't prepared for the political heat.
No. And I think that, I think unfortunately, we worked in an agency that is a law enforcement agency, but a big portion of it is not. And Molly Beatty was not a law enforcement officer by, experience or training. And they sometimes are unprepared for the fact that they lead a law enforcement agency. And
you hit that right on the nail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, we had great support from inside law enforcement, from the chief down. Mm-hmm. But man, from the top, and like I said, law enforcement was a tiny part of Fish and Wildlife.
Right.
Tiny. What, we have 180 agents at that time?
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
In the whole country?
Yeah. So, and I think that that has repeated itself in other incidents that have occurred where Fish and Wildlife Service law enforcement gets involved in something that's pretty, newsworthy, and the non-law enforcement people who lead the service kind of forget, oh shoot, this is a law enforcement agency, and they kind of drop the ball and they fail to lead. Anyway, so at this congressional hearing, there were a lot of lies told about you guys and what happened, right? But what saved you at that congressional hearing? Not saved you, but what basically showed all of those people to be liars, Steve?
Well, at the congressional hearing, I can tell you, let me look at my notes for a second. The hearings were like March 17th, and then in Boise, and the one in Washington was March 30th. But that tape wasn't transcribed and notarized. It was notarized on March 29th. So they weren't able to play that tape or the transcript at the hearing.
Okay.
So what would have been nice is if they would have had a copy of the tape and played it at the hearing.
100%. Yeah, right.
I mean, and they would have had a rude awakening on who was the aggressor and who was rude, what the sheriff did, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'll tell you what, Steve and Paul, I think one of the things that really vindicated you guys and says everything about what the truth was Yeah, like you said, Steve, unfortunately it couldn't have been played at the hearing, but a periodical called High Country News later did an article about this incident. And the headline of the article is basically, "Did Idaho libel the feds?" And, I think that says everything, right? Because as you read the article, you realize that this local sheriff and Hussey really went on a misinformation campaign to intentionally try to lie, to discredit you guys, both of you individually and Agent Riley, of course. So really that is, it must have been nice to read that and to know that, okay, the truth's out here now, right?
Yeah, but you know their intent. I just keep going back to their intent. And, the sheriff says that we didn't cooperate with him. I would have loved to have cooperated, but, I have a copy. You probably can't see it. I'll show you. Let me see if you can see it. See that picture of the guy in uniform there?
Yeah.
That's Sheriff Barcelo posing for a photo op with a dead wolf and calf before I ever got there.
Oh, so he'd already been out there. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and a writer up there for the paper, Candace Burns, she's the one that wrote that article about 3 armed agents, and the sheriff was making the big deal about armed agents. Of course, she didn't mention that the sheriff was armed, which he should be. We should all be. I mean,
that whole discussion about why are Fish and Wildlife Service agents armed is just absurd to me. I mean, we're 1811 federal agents. We're armed, and there's no question about it.
See, he didn't stop there. The sheriff went on to testify at the congressional hearing that he didn't understand why game wardens should be armed either. And one of the people in Idaho, they're called conservation officers. Montana, they're called game wardens. But at one of the hearings, someone asked, "Well, have you heard of Claude Dallas?"
I was just going to say Claude Dallas.
Barcelo was testifying. He never answered.
Mm-hmm.
But to show you the feeling, someone else, a couple other people in the crowd gave negative support to law enforcement after that comment. So
unbelievable. Yeah. But if listeners don't know, I'm sure they do, but if they don't, Claude Dallas is a notorious poacher who murdered 2 Idaho state game wardens for basically just checking his hunting camp. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was in 81 probably.
Yeah. 81.
Dumped their bodies in a river. Yeah. It was pretty awful. Paul, you felt particularly aggrieved by, the lies that had occurred and the reaction of Molly Beatty. What did you do? You and Agent Riley did after that?
Well, I mean, we both consulted attorneys. And I don't remember if Tom ever actually hired one, but I consulted one and I had one ready. And he actually wrote a letter to her and demanded that she recant her statement, which she did at some point after that. I think she died not long after that, and I don't remember of what, but it was sometime after that incident. She did recant it, and looking back on the whole thing, like that High Country article you said, I mean, we were liable. We could have sued. We could have sued a lot of people in Idaho, but I chose not to. My attorney said, he thought we had a really good case, but I chose not to. So.
Yeah. Why inflame it?
Yeah. I mean, I just it was really disheartening and discouraging, but I decided I just wanted to put it behind me and move on.
Well, listen, I want to commend both you guys for how you handled that case. I mean, it's frustrating because this wolf case went basically uninvestigated and nobody was held accountable because you were blocked at every opportunity. But, you really handled yourselves professionally, like professional federal agents, safely, respectfully. It's really a model for how agents should act in the field. So, kudos to both you guys for how you handled the case and weathered the storm. Must have been tough. Hey, before we wrap up, there was one thing, Paul, you mentioned to me when we were talking before this interview. When the wolves were set to be reintroduced in Idaho and Yellowstone, there were some threats that were made against wolves. Did either of you, I think, Paul, you did. If you did, can you explain it? Did either of you have any involvement in protecting the wolves as they were in those acclimation pens prior to release in Yellowstone?
Yeah, I mean, we were requested by Fish and Wildlife, the biologists who were going to transport them into the wilderness area, that we come along and provide security, because there were threats made to their lives if Fish and Wildlife goes through with this reintroduction of the wolves. So it was Tom, Riley, myself, and Steve. We all went in. That was the first release, I believe, wasn't it, Steve, in January 1995? And we went in on snow machines and to protect the biologists. We drove up there with them. We were in 3 cars to provide one car in front and 2 behind to provide protection all the way up there and during the release and back. Yeah.
And Steve.
Well, there was I used to have it. I don't have it anymore, but there was a little sign posted up near Salmon in a store that a guy took it down and gave it to me that said, kill all the wolves and the people that put them there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there was, you got the pro-wolf people on one side, and you have the anti-wolf people on one side. There's just not very many people that are neutral about it. They're real passionate.
Yeah, I don't know, Steve. I feel like there's more people who are kind of, I think the extremes are always the minorities, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But one thing that strikes me about that, Paul, is they wanted you for security, and I bet they were damn glad you were armed.
Yeah, very glad. With long guns and handguns.
Exactly. Right.
Well, at one point, the sheriff had said if he deemed it necessary, he would stop the wolves from coming into the county. And I don't know what he deemed necessary, but
yeah, I know. The rhetoric is, you got to take that stuff seriously because you don't know what people mean, right?
Yeah. Well, that doesn't sound real cooperative to me.
Sure doesn't. Hey, to wrap up what I'm doing, I'm asking all my guests at the end of their interviews what they think of wolves being reintroduced into the Western United States. So we'll start with you, Steve, as an agent, former agent, and as an individual. What's your view on wolf reintroduction in the West?
Well, I think there should be a few, but I don't think there should be too many because of conflict with livestock. If they're killing livestock, a wolf or a bear for that matter, you can't just pick it up and take it somewhere and drop it off and think it's not going to continue to kill easy prey.
But generally, you support the wolf reintroduction? Oh,
sure. Yeah. But it's also aggravating when I go out and go elk hunting, and the first thing you see is wolf tracks right there. I mean, we have plenty of wolves around Libby too, and Salmon and Limhi County isn't the only place with them. We just don't have that many cattle here.
Yeah, what that means is the wolves are going to scare off the elk you're trying to hunt.
Absolutely, because they're smart. Say you go to a grocery store and there's some gang hanging out there. Are you going to get out and go in or go to another store?
Well, I'm going to go in because I'm not afraid of anybody.
Yeah. I'll go to another store.
All right. Paul, what? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Steve.
Well, there should be a few, but just not too many. They have to be managed. They're an apex predator that reproduce quickly, and they have to be managed. And a few people say, well, they only kill a few cattle. But if you're the person that owns that cow or calf or sheep, that can really impact your pocketbook.
Mm-hmm.
So on an individual thing, it can be really expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that, Steve. I totally get it. I always come back to looking at statistics of losses of cattle in the West. Predators are such a small minority of the losses. Most of it's due to disease.
Yeah.
But it's the thing that gets me about the management thing is I've never understood why you don't treat wolf reintroduction as a successful opportunity for, trophy wolf hunting. It's just, it's another opportunity that could be presented.
That's what you do here now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's some debate about that in terms of the numbers they're allowing to be killed as to whether or not it's proper management. But that's probably a purpose for another episode or a whole nother show.
Well, the thing is that not many people can successfully go trap or shoot a wolf. It's not easy. I'm out all the time in the winter, and you'll see their tracks, and you have to worry about them killing your hounds when you're running a lion or a bobcat. If you see wolf tracks, you don't turn loose. But in reality, most people can't trap them, and you never see them in the daytime, hardly ever. I've only seen them 2 or 3 times in 20 years.
Yeah, they're elusive. There's no doubt. I've seen a few, but not every time I go, that's for sure.
They're pretty smart.
Yeah. Paul, what are your views on a wolf reintroduction?
Well, I'll go start with that by asking Steve. Steve, how many are you allowed to kill in Montana, wolves, right now?
I don't know. Probably 5 or 10, but nobody does.
I think it's 10, but nobody does because you can't find them.
Right.
And I'll say this, like, how did they disappear in the first place, right? Poison. That's how they disappeared.
Yeah.
Well, no one's going to allow that anymore. And I remember standing up in a meeting with Fish Wildlife and discussing this. I'm like, look, you're going to spend, and we did. The government spent, and this is why the government people hated us. We spent millions and millions and millions of dollars studying them and putting them in. And guess what we're doing now? We're spending millions and millions of dollars in trying to control them because they're out of control. Honestly, you can't hunt them. You can't trap them to control them. The only way you can control the population really is with poison, and no one's going to want to do that. I'm sure there's people doing it, right? But the government's not doing it, so they're hard to control. And at the end of the day, like Steve said, they're like a dog. They breed and they have a lot of puppies. And I mean, I honestly didn't see the sense in doing that many.
No, it was too quick.
I said, look, if you're going to put in 10 and cut it off, and they didn't. They kept putting them in and putting them in and putting them in, and no wonder people hated us. And it didn't have really, and I agree with you, Ed. I think you have extremists on both sides, and most people are in the middle at the end of the day on most things. And I think including the wolf thing. And most people were kind of in the middle on this. I think, well, yeah, it'd be nice to have a few, and it may take longer for them to have very many, but at the end of the day, they will have a lot of them. And now we have a lot of them. And
they're reclaiming territory.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking ahead like 30 years, and here we are 30 years later spending millions, and they're hard to control. And you can't hunt them. You can't control them by hunting. I mean, Steve's the mountain man.
You hardly ever see him.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Steve's the mountain man, and Steve was born 100 years too late. There's no question in my mind. And he's only seen a couple in 20 years.
Right.
You know, so it's yeah. I mean, I didn't see a lot of sense in it. Maybe I agree with Steve. Maybe a handful of them, and then leave it at that, and give them time to populate.
Great perspectives, guys. I appreciate you giving us your opinion. Also, I really appreciate you guys being willing to come on the show and talk about this. I could talk to you, both of you, all day. There's other cases you guys have worked on together and separately that I would love to have you talk about on the podcast. I hope both of you will consider coming back someday.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ed.
Awesome. It's been great to talk to you. This is such a fascinating incident case. I loved how it played out, and thank you both for the work you did for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and thanks for being on the show.
Yeah,
thanks for having us, Ed.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Anytime. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Nature's Secret Service is written and produced by me, Ed Newcomer, and is co-produced by the DHTV team here at California State University, Dominguez Hills. Follow us on social media and connect with us online at naturesecretservice.com.